Oh, this is Scott from Wessex Blades. This is part 3, Revenge of the Sheath. Parts we were going to do was the beginnings of the tubey bit that goes around there, and now that that's glued and that was dried, I'm going to be marking out where the stitching is going to be and stitching this onto here. I think that'll be enough for part 3. A long time ago in a garage far, far away. So, first up, get yourself a nice piece of leather. Offcut is plenty good enough, because all you'll be doing is something that looks a bit like that to go around the thing, but obviously enough overlap. So when the sheath looks like this can sort of go there. That's the target, that's the end goal. Okay, so let's poodle you down there and see if I can do it on camera in one take. Right, there she be. You see what I'm doing? Right, near as yap, stamp it. So there is our ferro rod. How much do we need? Well, it needs to be, I've got 65mm stuck out the end, 40mm, 50mm should be plenty, because I need a little bit exposed at the end to get the, where's the little oojimy flip gidgema figures. You need a bit stuck out for these things to work. So let's say 50mm. If we can see that, 50mm should be plenty. So if I think about making 2 or 3 from this, I should get my high-tech leather emblazoning marker. It's digitally applied. Fingers, digits. I don't know, my humour. It's 50. I should get a fair amount done there. Obviously move your wallet away because you carved through it. Bounds have been done before. So let's line up that with that. Does that look right? Yep. Double check. Measure twice. Cut once. Yes. So line them up. Nice big sort of safety ruler thing going on here. I'm not putting my fingers anywhere near where the blade's going to go. Be surprised. So this can still be used for those foldy ovary bits. Now, how much do I actually need to wrap around? That's probably plenty. So at that point there, offer it up. It's about 65mm. So whilst I'm here, whilst I'm on it, $65, 130, 190, but hey, I'm cutting it into 3, so that's good enough. Back the other way, 65, 130. Now, with these cutting mats, I can always line it on a straight line there and use the lines in the gridworks to help myself line up. I could use an engineer square to get it square. Anything for accuracy. So there's one piece, pretty thick. Double check just before I cut it in half. That's plenty. Always better to have a little bit too much than not quite enough. yeah, I do retract the blade. Just get rid of it just for now, because there's all sorts of stuff. There's one left out, the blade's retracted. Give myself a bit of space without putting my hand down and catching on the edge of a blade. Duh, you cut yourself. Right, so if I felt like it now, I could just make that wet, wrap that around there, come back in an hour later, and that's gone all rotten and horrible. Because there's all sorts of things in there that absolutely hate water. So, the trick is, yes, the trick is cling film. Oh, that looks of suspicion when I disappear in the garage with a roll of cling film. And now that's wrapped up. And if you're wanting to do a simple ferro rod tube, you just make that wet and wrap it round. I want to do something a little bit clever. If it's going to wrap around that way, is it? Yes. That's what it's going to do. That's what I'm going to do. Get that, get that set up to about there. Make sure that's as square as it can be. Pretty good. I'll do my edge beveling now. So that's this forky chisel-y thing. What I'm going to do, try and get that over the top. Oh, we slipped in the Stallone film there. Right, just about to be able to make that out. Okay, so edgy chisel-y thingy. Off that comes away like that. And to our side, just to make it nice and neat. One little thing, I try and get rid of all that crap now because it just fills up your bench. If you've got a bag just ready to go. Now, with something that's almost square, keep checking which way around it goes. There's no point doing it and end it the wrong way. All right, that's where it's supposed to be going. Yep. So that way, let's get this, and I'm going to go like that. Knowing that most of the ends going to be disappeared around the back out of the way, stitched up, so you won't see the closed ends of those. You just end up with that trick looking ridges, and that's done. Before we've done anything else, that's it, done, finished. In terms of if you want to do any stamping, I've just done a simple grooved line. Right, what else can you do at this stage? Well, a drop of water, and you usually have a piece of polythene soaking in the thing. Nope, usually have a little pot just for a paintbrush. Don't even need that. Now this is the beauty of the oak tanned leather. Okay, I've just wetted the ends up a little bit. Alright, then you get these little weird gizmos. So it's a turned piece of hardwood, okay, with these little grooves in it. And what I'm trying to do is, that's wet and now softer, which is more conducive to getting deformed by you rubbing up and down on it like this. Yes, wet rubbed leather. And the name of this little widget is called a slicker, or an edge burnishing tool. And it can be anything from small little dinky things like this I make, up to manly and beefy, and sometimes they have a tapered end. Sometimes you're busy on a lathe, you make weird looking things like this, and they all rub the edges of the leather down when it's wet. So we'll come back later when I've done both of these edges. I'll slid it up and down in that groove, and this gently rounds the edges off, and I can use that part there to smooth out that raw edge there, which will be on the top of the tube when it's formed. I'll see in a bit when I've done the other side. Now at this stage, if you're really vain, you could wax something like that on it. So, John Welling's section of railroad. Man, what a lovely little anvil that is. So I put that there, I hold that there, and here's the thing. You got one shot. Whew! There 'tis. Also, it's right in the middle, so when that's like that, you go from lean and mean to full on fat Leonidas. Okay, now what I'm going to do is soak it. And this little pot, sort of ramekin, I think it's one of them, is it goo, the puddings? It's one of them sort of creme brulee pots. This is just enough so I haven't got to disappear out and get a jam jar for the water. But all you need is a little sort of pot around somewhere. But this thing here is stable to leave open from your paintbrush. You'll see that at a later stage. Okay, get rid of that. Get rid of hammer. Tang stamp. And now the practice. That's not practice doing over and over and over, to practice the technique of wet moulding. I'm just trying to encourage it to form around the cylinder of the ferro rod, encouraging it to take on that shape before you clamp it. Check it sort of looks straight. Check I got this the same side over side, so it's not like that on the back, but this is actually even. And then pick a suitable piece of leather. That looks about right to put there in order to clamp it without making too many marks on the actual wet leather, which is really susceptible to marks and nicks and pressures. Okay, so now you let that dry somewhere suitable. Not in my garage, it's awful. Okay, somewhere where it's not too hot, like over a radiator or something, just to let it dry out happily. next stage. See you in a bit.
Okay, welcome back. Now, my actual adeptness at doing this is going to be somewhat jilted, as it were, because I got the tripod between my legs and I'm trying to look at what I'm doing through the viewfinder. So what I'm doing now is this thing that's already contact adhesive on the back, the rings through, and I've already dyed at the inside. I'm now going to use the groover in order to plan out where the stitches are going to go, like that, and just lightly planning it out, because when you go down there's a sudden change of line when you're going like this, and it just an idea. What I want to be able to do is get spacing along there, so where it turns the corner I'm going to have a nice even set of stitches, so I'm not going to have too big a gap on this awkward little corner here, and not so many I'm going to get none in, or I don't want to try and get 3 in, like 3 or 2, or you don't want 7 to fit in there. It's sort of something you got to work out when you get there. That to there, there to there. Okay, so now I'm actually going to go for it. I haven't started at the top because I don't know how the spacing of the wheel's going to go. I leave this cross bit till I've done the stitching wheel. So I'm just going to go from there to there and stop. When you're running this edge up against this piece of leather, don't press down too hard, because you'll mark this section of leather too much and you'll actually see that. The odd little bit of pressure you'll get away with, but don't bear down too hard. What you want to do is bear down into this piece whilst you run that up against there. You're not crushing this piece into that bit of leather. And then there's that little piece there, which I'm quite happy is there's going to be one hole here, one hole here, one hole here, one hole here. I won't use a stitching wheel for that. I'll just work out with an awl or something, and then something about the same as there, and then up but not to the top, so it looks even. Now what I do is I bring my ramekin back, my trusted little paintbrush, and all I'm doing is I'm running water. Get into the groove, boy, you gotta prove it, love to me. I know, Madonna. Okay, straight away I can see I need to go a little bit higher on that side, just to give myself a chance to get it even. There we go. Stitching wheel. Dun, dun, dun. However many stitches per inch this wheel is. This is the biggest set of teeth I got for the furthest apart stitches. Otherwise you're stitching forever. Now I do know I've got an awl here, so it's going to be one there and one there. So my stitching wheel, my tooth goes in that hole, which is a nice neat corner of that inner groove there, and I go up and bear down hard onto that section, so I get the same stitching in terms of numbers and spacing on both sides. Now I could say forever and a day, make sure you keep it running in a straight line, because there's nothing worse than going end of sheath. Understanding? Okay, when you say run in a straight line, it's run in a straight line. Alright, not that. You need to keep it absolutely, your arm is like on a rail. So they're happy. I now know from there to there it's going to be where I'm going to be grooving. Okay, whether it's perfectly symmetrical or not, it's at least it's going to look even. Okay, sometimes I go like this, give myself a bit of room. Alright, paintbrush. Now, will it mash up the other side? I'll go halfway from both ends. Will it meet in the middle? Almost. Works for me. And now we can tidy up the bottom end. Back a little. Perfect. And then from there to there, I'm just going to press down. From there to there, press down. So it's close. Alright. Now we're going to drill them out. Okay, so now I've drilled those out, I've got the holes on the back. Now, the grooving tool is Ooge Me Flip. That's basically to just remove enough leather, and by the time that the stitching wheel's gone down, that there's a trough for the stitching to sit in, so it doesn't get caught on the outside by thorns and bits and bobs and edges of tables and things, and on the inside it doesn't get caught by the blade as it's moved in and out. Okay, so you protect the stitching in the fact that it's recessed down inside the leather. So now I know where those holes are. I'm going to use this and a straight edge just to give the stitching a little sort of channel. To sit in. Now, you could use a ruler if you're really cocky. You just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Okay, so that's just removed a little scuff of leather away. And then, well, I just whiz that over because it makes it look neat and it's a satisfying little task. It's just one of them, it looks so much nicer when the stitching wheel's gone over it sort of things. Again, on this side, the drill's gone through and pulled up again, so the groove isn't quite as neat as what it was when it went down. So I just can't help but fiddle. Just prepares the leather for when you're going to be doing the stitching. And it just allows the thread to sit
down inside that little groove there.
And now we can get stitching. Okay, now this is something that I do. I'm not saying it's the best way. I keep the needles I'm going to use chunked into a piece of leather like that. I keep the last rag end or thread I had on there until I'm about to use it. My daft theory being, if I drop this on the floor, that is easier to see with all that thread on it than just the needle. It's easier to pick up as well. So it just makes it bigger if you lose it. So I take the 2 needles I'm going to use now, and now I take that rag end off from my previous job. Also pays to have a scrap bit of scrap piece of leather, and you put it down on that because it's easier to see the needle on there. Thread wise, it's this waxed stuff I get from Tandy Leather. Oh, it's luckily found the end. How much? More than enough in terms of how much thread you're going to use, because I'm using a lock stitch. It uses up a fair bit. My general formula is whatever that length, circumference, root, whatever that distance is around what you're going to stitch, you want 6 times. So there's 1, and then I do this. That was about once round. That's 2. That's 3, and then double it. So that would be 6. And then I cut it. Oh look, a knife. And then I cut a bit more off as well. There's nothing worse than being 3 stitches short at the end. When it comes to cost, I know I'm like a hobbyist. I'm not really in the ballpark of full-on makers, but you know, that's a few pound. I'm not gonna dick about worrying about 100 mil of this at the end of the day. I'll just cut it plenty long enough and throw the rest away. That's the only way to be, really, when it comes to a few things, and thread's one of them. So jam it through somehow, get all 3 threads through that little eye. Again, I got the needle over the table if I ditch it. Is that through now? Okay, it is now enough through. Right, there's plenty of thread through. I'm now going to lock it onto the needle. This stops it pulling through when you're pulling hard on the thread. And all I do is I get it up to where near the end of the needle is, and I untwizzle the weave of the thing and poke the needle through and out the other side. So once again, I'm undoing the twist of the thread and getting it through, pulling it over, and now I've like lassoed it on the end of there, and then back up on itself, so there's about this much left over at the end. Same the other side. So that's out the way. You know you're knocking on 40 when this starts getting harder. No, just caught one. Is that through there? Yeah, so I suppose 80 mils through, 90 mil up on itself, right near the end of the needle. I untwist it, and put it through the untwisted thread. So now the needles are hanging on the end like that. And now to stitch it. It's quick, isn't it? Okay, it's not a money shot, alright, between me knees here. This is, it's not really a stitching pony, it's more like a donkey. Alright, it's just a board with something like that. Piece of board, a block. The bolt goes through to the bottom, so that swivels. A bolt with a wing nut. Up the top here. And enough clearance to get your work in. And enough spring and everything, so when you do the nut up, it clamps on the lever and holds it still. I've got lever in there as well, because if you clank it up too tight, you'll actually mark your lever, which you don't want. So that now fits in there. I always worked inside to my right, which got a bit awkward filming wise, but what I can do is maybe turn or something. So that's my right hand side. I like starting from that side. The second stitch goes through, my right hand being my stronger hand, that's the one that does the lock stitch. So if I was doing this with the square around there, okay, I would start on this side of the top. So if there were 9 stitches there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I'd start on stitch 4 and go that way. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, come back round, all the way around, 1, 2, 3, 4, then going over it again, over 5, over 6, and then back. So that means the double stitch that comes back on itself is right in the middle of the top, because I started a stitch or 2 back. So it starts here, goes around, doubles up on itself, back on itself, and ends up on 4. So that all the fat double stitching is in the middle of the top bit. It's just, it looks neat. So I like starting from the back, just shy of the middle. So that would be where I hopefully find the holes, get my eye into where they're going to be. There. Now I can go one more. There he is. So he's not in the middle, he's just my side of the middle. I now get the same amount of thread both sides. Of course my fingers can barely feel the needles. So it's the same both sides, and now do what would be about in the middle. So now I'm making that first stitch that away. I come up and I leave about that much of a loop. That stitch has come through. He has come through from that side. The one that's on the left, which would be here, now goes back through the one that's just come through on that side, with about that much slack. The thread of the first stitch that went through, I now go 1, 2 over the needle. I'll zoom in somehow with the tripod and show you that. See what we can do here. Get up and personal. So impromptu. Okay, so here's my first stitch come through. Here's his mate on the other side going back through to sort of complete the stitch. On the back side, that's the one that went through first. I loop it around the needle twice. Push the needle through. And then pull it tight. I then have a bit of a tug of war, evening up the loops, so the loops end up inside the lever. And I can play and fiddle and jiggle about. I now have an opportunity to get the thread the same to both sides, whilst there's only one stitch in. And if it looks slightly out, I
I can just even it up, because there's nothing worse now than having it 15mm out and you being that one stitch short at the end. Yeah. So if you get it even now, so they're both the same, at least you've got a chance of you've measured it right. You ain't going to cock yourself up because you had far too much out one side than the other. And all you do now is go over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I come through from that side. Find difficulty seeing because I'm sideways on, as it were. Yep, there he is. Push it through. Leave a bit. Leave a bit. It's mate from the other side. Then goes through. And in that stitch, which has got the loop on, the piece that was going through, you go 1, 2. And then tug of war, evening up the stitch on both sides. It's easy in about 30 minutes because I'm slow and laborious. Now, whilst I'm doing this sort of walkthrough tutorial, and sort of, as it were, yielding up stark black magic secrets of certain crafts, what I don't want to do is cheapen the craft that it looks like it's simpler than it is, because what you can't do is do shortcuts. It's a diligent sort of way of working, and if you try and do shortcuts, or you try and do something that's not really in keeping with the theory. Right, so one stitch away from the end. With this one, I've completed a complete circuit. One, two, three, two. I now go one stitch over. Very difficult because it's now packed out with stitching already, and that's where he's coming handy. And hold the shaft, not the eye. It goes through. Lock it off. Knot it tight, and then go backwards. Go back the other way. So that one now has got 3 stitches through it. And you wonder why an awl poking a hole in is barely enough. This is why I like drilling. God, that's an hard thing. It's there. Lock that off. And then if I can get the one on the this is now the front, this is the inside, put that through this side, so it's lock stitched. It's gone back on itself a stitch and a half,
cut it, but not totally flat. So there's still two spiky ends stuck up. Stitchy wheel at the ready. Cigarette lighter. And like paracord, you're going to warm up those and then stitch them down neat and tidy with the wheel like this. So the end is heated, mushroomed over and flattened. Plus it's lock stitched as well. So on the back you've got hardly anything visible, just that sort of triple stitch that's there. On the front, once you go over all the stitches again with the stitching wheel, TADA, that's what you're left with. And on the back it's sunk down so the knife doesn't catch it on the way through. So there, that's drying. I'll see you on the next instalment. But again, just gives you an idea of people like Sandy Jack, Lord John Wellens, I'll be Lever, Leo Dis Lever, what they go through. See you on the next one.